Chapter 4 Otis and the 30 Bugs. I wish I could stir up a little excitement around here, thought Otis one day after school. His mother was busy at the Spofford School of the Dance, and Mrs. Brewster said she didn't want him underfoot when she was trying to run the vacuum cleaner in the front hall of the apartment house. Otis didn't see how she could call sliding down the banisters being underfoot. Otis wandered over to Stewy's house to see if Stewy had any ideas. Stewy couldn't think of anything to do either, so the two boys and Stewy's dog, Spud, started aimlessly down the street. This isn't very exciting, thought Otis, as he watched Spud stop to scratch. The dog stood on three legs while he scratched with his hind foot. That dog doesn't know enough to sit down to scratch, observed Otis, hoping to get a rise out of Stewy. It takes a smart dog to stand up to scratch, boasted Stewy. Let's go over to the high school and watch football practice. Okay, agreed Otis, leapfrogging over a fire hydrant. Let's go. Suddenly, Stewy pointed. Hey, look! Isn't that Hack Battleston over there? It sure is, agreed Otis in an awed voice, as both boys stopped to admire Hack Battleston. Gee, thought Otis, I wish I had a piece of paper. Maybe he would give me his autograph. Hack was not only fullback and captain of the Zachary P. Taylor High School football team, he had also been chosen the most promising football player in the whole city by the sports editor of the Oregonian. Sometimes he was called 5-Yard Battleston, because whenever his team needed to gain 1 yard, Hack could gain 5. Otis and Stewy often watched Hack at football practice. That was one time when Otis did not want to stir up any excitement. He just wanted to watch Hack kick the football farther than anyone else on the field and tackle the dummy so hard that the dust flew in the clouds. Twice Stewy's father had taken the boys to see Hack play in a real game in the stadium on the other side of the city. I wonder how come he isn't at football practice now, said Otis. Hack, who was standing out on his front lawn, held a fruit jar in one hand and appeared to be looking for something. Sure is funny, agreed Stewy. What's he doing anyway? Search me, said Otis. Gee, look at those muscles. I wish I had muscles like that. Otis made up his mind to start doing exercises that very night. Otis noticed that Hack stood with one thumb hooked through the belt of his jeans. Otis hooked his thumb through the belt of his jeans, too. Just then, the boys saw Hack leap into the air and clap the lid on the jar. He looked into the jar, shook his head, and looked around once more. The boys sat down on the curb opposite Hack's house to watch. I know what, said Otis. Let's give him a yell like we learned at the game. The boys began to yell at the top of their lungs. T-T-T-A-Y, L-L-L-O-R, T-A-Y, L-O-R, Taylor! Hack paid no attention. He leapt into the air with his fruit jar again. The boys got up and walked across the street where they stood in front of Hack's house. Let's try the Zachary P. Taylor football song, whispered Otis. The boys began to sing. Z.P. Taylor, School of Honored Name, fight, 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 along the road to fame. We'll win because of might. We'll keep your victory bright. Rah, rah, rah. This time Hack glanced at the boys and the dog. Hi, kids, he said, and went on hunting. Otis and Stewy looked at each other. Hack Battleston, 5-Yard Battleston, fullback and captain of the Zachary P. Taylor football team, actually had spoken to them. Encouraged, the boys moved closer. Otis was first to get up his courage. What are you doing? He asked. Trying to catch insects, answered Hack in a way that showed he was much too busy to waste time talking to grade school boys. How come you're catching bugs when there's football practice going on? Stewy asked. I have to, said Hack. Why? Persisted Otis. Hack scowled. For biology class. We were supposed to hand in a collection of 30 insects last week, and I was too busy with football practice to catch them. Now the teacher says if I don't hand them in by tomorrow, she'll tell the principal, and then I can't play on the team. Gee, and the big game with Benjamin Harrison High is next week, said Otis. He and Stewy were shocked. To think that a teacher could not only give orders to Hack Battleston, but could make him miss football practice. Otis recovered first. I'll catch them for you, Hack, he said eagerly. It wasn't every boy who had the chance to do something for the captain of the team, and the best football player in the whole city. Would you? Hack's manner toward the younger boy suddenly changed. Say, that would be swell. Then I could go back to football practice. I'll catch them too, said Stewy. You keep out of this. It was my idea, said Otis, who did not want any help from Stewy. He wanted to tell people that he alone caught 30 insects for Hack Battleson. Why, it was practically the same thing as saving the big game for the Zachary P. Taylor High School. I thought of it at the same time, objected Stewy. You just said it first. That's what counts, said Otis. Why don't you go exercise your dog or something? He doesn't need exercise, answered Stewy. Then is it okay if I catch them for you? Otis asked Hack. He was anxious to have it clearly understood that he was the one to collect the insects. I don't care who catches them, answered Hack, who was in a hurry to get to the football field. Just so somebody has 30 insects here by 6:30. It can't be any later, because I'll probably be up all night trying to identify them as it is. And they all have to be insects. You can tell an insect because it has 6 legs. Centipedes and things like that don't count. Otis was disappointed that Stewy was to have an equal chance, but he didn't feel that he could say anything to Hack about it. And they have to be in good condition, continued Hack as he held up his fruit jar. See that piece of cotton in the jar? It's soaked in cleaning fluid, the kind that takes spots off clothes. When I catch an insect, I put it in the jar and put the lid on in a minute. The fumes kill the insect without hurting it. Sure, I get it, said Otis. How about letting me take your jar? Hey, that's no fair, objected Stewy. That way you'd have a head start. Sure I'd have a head start, said Otis. For Pete's sake, if you kids are going to stand there fighting all day, I'll get another jar for you, said Hack, who was really pleased to have 2 boys so anxious to work for him. Otis and Stewy glared at each other until Hack returned with the second jar. Okay, kids, see you at 6:30. Hack waved as he hurried off to the Zachary P. Taylor football field. Just you wait. I'll beat you to the 30 bugs, said Stewy. Otis did not waste time answering. At least he had a head start. At home he had 2 insects. A dead dragonfly he had picked up once because he thought it was pretty, and a yellow butterfly that had died when he tried to keep it in a jar. Now he pawed through some dead leaves under a shrub until he saw an earwig. He scooped it into the jar and screwed on the lid. Stewy watched him and then did the same thing. The boys glowered at each other. Otis decided he better get away from Stewy, or Stewy would copy all his ideas. Otis knew he had to work fast if he was going to catch all those insects by 6:30. So long, he said, and ran down the street. Otis stopped to hunt among some flowers in a neighbor's yard. When he found a tiny green aphis clinging to the underside of a rose leaf, he carefully scooped it off and added it to the earwig in the jar. A ladybug flitted past, but before Otis could grab it, it lit on a rose bush growing on a trellis against the house. When Otis tried to grab the ladybug, it flew to a leaf just out of his reach. Otis started to climb the trellis. The lady who lived in the house burst out onto the front porch. Otis Spofford, you come down out of my climbing President Hoover. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me do that again. Otis Spofford, you come down out of my climbing President Hoover this instant, she ordered. Otis was so startled that he grabbed at a thorny branch instead of the trellis. You're what? He asked, trying to untangle his t-shirt from the thorns. My climbing President Hoover. My prize rosebush. The lady was very cross. I won't have it broken. Come down at once. The ladybug flitted away, so Otis jumped to the ground. Thorns ripped his t-shirt, but he couldn't let the ladybug out of sight. And don't you come onto my garden again, said the owner of the rosebush. I won't, promised Otis, keeping his eye on the ladybug, and thinking that if he were a grown-up with a prize rosebush, he would want boys to catch bugs in it. He jumped up and cupped his hands together. There, I got you, he thought. That was one insect closer to winning the game. In the next yard, Otis pried a rock out from a rock garden, but all he found under it was a worm and a crawly thing with too many legs to be an insect. A fly buzzed by, and Otis wasted several precious minutes chasing it before it flew out of reach. He saw a bee hovering over a flower. Quickly he clapped it, flower and all, into the jar. Otis was about to investigate another rock when the owner of the garden appeared. She smiled at Otis. Hello, boy. Come here and let me show you all my pretty flowers, she said. It was perfectly plain to Otis that she didn't really want him in her garden at all. He didn't see why grown-ups had to be so fussy about a few old flowers. No, thank you, he said. He didn't have time to make friends with anyone. Not today, anyway. The lady started across the yard toward Otis. She looked so determined to be friendly that Otis decided he'd better leave in a hurry, or he would be looking at pretty flowers, whether he wanted to or not. Well, goodbye, he said, and ran down the street, feeling that he had had a narrow escape. As Otis was passing Stewy's house, a tiny moving speck on the sidewalk caught his eye. It was an ant that Otis lost no time in scraping up with a twig, poking into his jar. "That's my bug," yelled Stewy from half a block away. "You give it back to me." "It is not," Otis yelled back. "It is too. I saw you pick it up in front of my house." Stewy looked hot and cross. "It was on the sidewalk, and sidewalks don't belong to you. They belong to the city." Otis wasn't going to waste time arguing. When he reached his apartment house, he found Bucky sitting on the front steps waiting for him. "Say, Otis," said Bucky, "let's play like we're—" "I know what," interrupted Otis. "Let's play like we're scientists, hunting bugs in the jungle. Let's see how many bugs we can capture." Bucky was delighted to receive this much attention from Otis. "Dead or alive?" he asked. "Alive," said Otis. "We'll shut them up in this jar. You go that way, and I'll go this way." He found a spider in the shrubs and was about to put it in his jar when he remembered. A spider had 8 legs. It was not an insect. "I've got one!" shrieked Bucky. "It's like a ladybug, only yellow with black dots." He held up his 2 hands cupped together. "Swell," said Otis. "Here, put it in the jar." "I can't," said Bucky. "It's a fierce jungle bug. It's putting up a terrible fight. It's trying to eat me up alive. Help! Help!" Bucky fell to a tiny patch of grass in front of the apartment house, where he rolled and kicked. "Oh, for Pete's sake!" Otis was disgusted. He might have known this was the way a kindergartner would behave. "I'll save you," he called, and fell to the grass beside Bucky to pry open his hands and take out the bug. "You saved my life," panted Bucky. "This is a keen game." Otis was not so sure, but at least he had another insect for hack battleson. Otis then caught a fly, a mosquito, and a white moth. Bucky captured a beetle, a stink bug, and a grasshopper that put up a battle and spit brown juice all over Bucky's hands. I don't even know if that is spit, but what the heck do I know? I know nothing about bugs. "There's Stewy across the street," explained Bucky. "Look, he's got a jar too." "Come on, let's go around and back," suggested Otis quickly. "Hey, Stewy!" Bucky yelled. "Are you playing like you're hunting fierce bugs in the jungle too?" "Shh!" hissed Otis. Too late. Stewy came across the street. He held his jar behind his back so Otis could not see how many bugs he had. He glared at Otis, who also held his jar out of sight. Then he said to Bucky, "How would you like to hunt bugs in the jungle with me for a change?" "Hey, cut it out," said Otis. "Bucky and I are having a keen time all by ourselves. Aren't we, Bucky?" Bucky beamed. "We sure are." Otis stepped around Stewy to try and catch a glimpse of his jar. If only he knew how many insects Stewy had. Stewy saw what Otis was trying to do and moved a couple of feet so Otis couldn't see behind him. "I know what," said Bucky. "Let's all play like we're hunting in the jungle together." "Let's not," said Otis and Stewy together. This time Stewy tried to see behind Otis's back while Otis glared and moved away. "Guess I'll be going now," said Stewy. "I'm about through anyway. So long. See you at 6:30. Stewy started home. Then he called back, "Unless I decide to take my 30 bugs over sooner." "I like Stewy. Don't you?" asked Bucky. Otis did not answer. He was too busy worrying. Was Stewy telling the truth or was he bluffing? He wished he knew. Otis tried to think where Stewy might have found a lot of insects all at once. That gave him an idea. "Come on, Bucky," he said. On either side of the front porch of the apartment house was a porch light that burned all night. Otis knew that insects were attracted to them. He boosted Bucky up to one of the lights and told him how to unscrew it. He was rewarded by a shower of dust and dead moths. Mrs. Brewster flung open the front door. She had a dish towel wrapped around her hair and a broom in her hand. "Now what are you boys up to?" she demanded as she began to sweep the moths off the porch. "Just look at the litter on this porch." Bucky looked frightened, but Otis could not let the collection of moths be smashed to bits by the broom. "I'll sweep the porch," he offered. We were just cleaning the bugs off the light for you, and I'd like to sweep the porch." "All right," said Mrs. Brewster crossly, "but see that you get it clean. Goodness knows I have enough other work to do." That was close, thought Otis, as he got on his hands and knees to examine his harvest. There was not only an assortment of moths, there were 3 kinds of gnats as well. Of course the bugs had been cooked by the heat of the light, but Otis was sure Hack wouldn't mind, because their legs and wings were all in place. He hadn't said the bugs had to be raw. The second light produced 2 more moths and several insects. Otis already had. "If I were collecting just for fun, I would save them for traders," Otis thought, and picked a dead wasp out of a cobweb. "Dead bugs aren't any fun," complained Bucky. "They don't put up a fight." "Why don't you play like you're a janitor?" suggested Otis, who knew Bucky would do anything to please him. "You could have lots of fun sweeping the porch for Mrs. Brewster." "Okay," agreed Bucky. Otis continued the hunt alone. Fortunately, this was the day his mother gave a private ballet lesson after her tap dancing class, so he knew she would be late getting home. He hoped Stewy's mother would insist on his taking time to eat dinner before 6:30. At 6 o'clock, Otis went into his apartment where he emptied a box of crackers onto the drain board. Then he lined the box with cotton and arranged his insects in rows. "I'll bet old Stewy won't think of this," he thought. He'll probably bring his all bunched up in the jar." Counting the dragonfly and butterfly, Otis had 28 insects. At 7 minutes after 6, Otis found a different kind of ant crawling on the garbage can behind the apartment house. That made 29. By a quarter after 6, Otis was frantically beating the shrubs. He saw flies, earwigs, ladybugs, insects he already had. At 25 minutes past 6, he knew he could hunt no longer. He had to take a chance on finding his last insect on the way to Hack's house. Stewy was sitting on Hack's front steps with a candy box on his knees. Spud lay at his feet. "Hi," he said. "Hack's late getting home, or I'd have given him my 30 bugs a long time ago." Otis pretended to admire his collection so much that he did not hear. However, he was careful to close the lid of his box before he sat down beside Stewy. "Just remember, I was here first," said Stewy. Otis did not say anything. Holding his box so Stewy couldn't see in it, he took out the dragonfly and held it up to admire. "Hack will be glad to get this. You don't often see such a beauty," he remarked, because he was so sure Stewy did not have a dragonfly. By the worried look on Stewy's face, he knew that he was right. "He'd probably rather have my queen bee," said Stewy. Now it was Otis's turn to look worried. Did Stewy really have a queen bee? How did he know it was a queen? Otis decided that it was probably a plain old bumblebee that he just called a queen. The boys sat in uneasy silence until Hack Battleson turned the corner. "Hi, Hack!" they yelled, then glared at each other. "Hi, kids," answered Hack. "Sorry I'm late, but I had a few things to talk over with the coach." Otis looked admiringly at Hack. Maybe someday he would have to talk over a few things with the coach. Maybe when he got to high school, the coach would remember that he was the boy who saved the big game by catching bugs. And he would have a purple sweater with a big red T on one side and 3 red stripes on the left sleeve to show he had played on the team 3 years, just like Hack. "Here are the bugs," said Stewy. Annoyed with himself for letting Stewy get ahead of him, Otis thrust his box at Hack too. "I've got some keen insects," he said. Hack sat down on the steps. He opened Stewy's box first and counted all the insects while Otis waited anxiously. 30, announced Hack. "I guess that's that," thought Otis, suddenly feeling tired and hungry. He had not saved the game for the Zachary P. Taylor High School after all. He had lost it by 1 bug. Just 1 little old bug. And Stewy would never let him forget it either. Hack opened Otis's box. "Look at that dragonfly," he said. "That's a beauty." Otis felt a little better. At least Hack Battleson admired his dragonfly. That was something. Otis stepped over Spud and sat down on the steps while Hack counted his insects. 29, said Hack. "You're 1 short." "Ha!" said Stewy. "So you didn't have 30 at all." "You needn't rub it in," thought Otis as his eye fell on Stewy's collection. "Hey, wait a minute," he shouted. "Neither do you. You've got a spider, and they don't count. They've got 8 legs." That's right, agreed Hack. If they have 8 legs, they aren't insects. Let's have another look at that box. Surely Hack would take Otis's collection now because of the dragonfly. Otis waited anxiously. Spud stood up on 3 legs to scratch. As Otis watched the dog, he was suddenly stunned by an idea. If only Stewy didn't think of it at the same time. Otis quickly looked over at Stewie's collection. No, Stewy didn't have one. That made his idea even better. But Stewy had an idea of his own. I know what, Otis heard him say to Hack. I'll pull off a couple of its legs, then it will be a 6-legged bug. Otis parted Spud's coarse hair and began to search for something. That won't work, objected Hack to Stewy's suggestion. Otis's thumb and forefinger closed on something that he quickly popped into the jar. I don't see why, Stewy was saying. I bet the teacher would think it was some new kind of bug. She's too smart for that, said Hack. Somebody tried it already. Then Otis spoke. Here's my 30th insect, he said as he reached into the jar. What is it? Asked Hack. A flea, answered Otis. A flea? Hack began to laugh, but he took the tiny insect and added it to Otis's collection. Then he closed the box. Thanks a lot, he said. I guess I ought to get a pretty good grade on this collection, even if I'm late handing it in. Stewy turned to Otis. Where did you get that flea? He demanded. Off Spud, said Otis. That's what I thought. Stewy was angry. That was my flea. You took my flea. Don't you wish you'd thought of it? Cheered Otis. So long, Hack. Spud's fleas are my fleas, and you didn't have any right to take it, said Stewy as Hack went into the house. It was just plain cheating. That's what that was. Aw, you're just mad because you weren't smart enough to think of it first, taunted Otis. Otis Spofford! I'll... Stewy sputtered. You'll have to catch me first, yelled Otis and ran down the street. And as he ran, he was no longer Otis Spofford running home to dinner. He was 5-yard Spofford, running 99 and a half yards for a touchdown to save the big game for the Zachary P. Taylor High School. Well, apparently they had fun catching bugs. I personally wouldn't. Please join me for the next chapter.